very stressful not knowing if you were going to be allowed in this call. So we do appreciate your patience up front. We were going to go ahead and get started. We want to welcome you to the Vendors Conference for KDE for the Last Mile, RFP 758-21-00000061. The Commonwealth is notifying you at this time that this meeting will be recorded. We do ask that you mute and have your cameras off if you are not speaking, just so that we can keep this very organized. We do appreciate that up front. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Stacy Blank. I think I have emailed each and every one of you at some time in the last 24 hours. I do appreciate your all's attendance on this. I am the Director of the Division of Information Technology within the Office of Procurement Services. We are part of the Finance Cabinet. We will have the opportunity for you all to ask questions to KDE regarding the RFP, and also the OPS team, the Office for Procurement Services, in regards to the procurement related questions. We do ask that you submit all questions from today, as well as any additional questions that you may have, via email to me no later than 3:30 this afternoon on 8/27/2020. Please see section 10.9 of the RFP that will give you the dates and times for all important information. Also, if you'll look at section 10.6, you can also receive my email address, but I think you all already have it. When you're submitting your form for your questions, we do request that you put them on attachment D, which is the formal questions form that you have to submit to the OPS cabinet for them to be answered. Commonwealth's responses are not binding until it's in writing via the RFP addendum. I do want to remind everyone right now to please mute your, be sure that you're muted. We do reserve the right not to answer questions today and post such answers in the addendum. When asking questions, please state your name and your company. Please remember, I'm the sole point of contact. You are not permitted to contact anyone other than myself regarding this procurement. If this does occur, your proposal may be rejected and not considered for award. At this time, we would like to introduce the state teams. For the Finance Cabinet with us today, we have Joan Graham, who is the Executive Director of the Office of Procurement Services.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks, Stacy.
Absolutely. Next, we have Kathy Robinson, who is the Deputy Executive Director of the Office of Procurement Services.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you. Thank you, Stacy.
Absolutely. And next but not finally is my right arm, left foot, left whatever, Susan Nolan, who is our IT consultant for the Division of Information Technology.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday.
At this time, I would like to turn it over to David Couch, the Associate Commissioner of KDE, to introduce his team as well as to lead us into the overview of this RFP.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate everyone gathering today. With me today will be Mike Lettingham. He's one of our division directors within the Kentucky Department of Education Office of Education Technology. And Melissa Moore. Melissa Moore, Melissa is part of Mike's staff that helps us out with this type of thing whenever we do bids of really of any kind. She's part of that. So this
David,
is
I think Martin joined as well. So
okay.
So
Martin Herberner is part of our staff as well, part of Mike's team. So he's joining late. So appreciate our folks joining and everyone else. I would call this going the last mile for the student. It is an initiative. We've been doing that for quite some time. This is my 29th year at the Kentucky Department of Education and my 23rd as the CIO of Kentucky K-12. I'm the longest acting K-12 CIO in the United States. I think my next closest peer is like 7 or 8 years. So I know a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two, at least for K-12 wise in education technology. our Kentucky Education Technology System, you'll hear that phrase, KETS, Kentucky Education Technology System, was birthed out of the Kentucky Education Reform Act in 1990. So KETS has been around since 1992. A couple items I'll point you to give you, you can look and educate yourself on it as well, is if you, with anything that you use any search engine, if you do KDE, KD stands for Kentucky Department of Education, just KDE digital readiness reports, it'll send you to something that gives a breakdown of every school district of what they have, what they don't have technology-wise as far as digital readiness, including it asks questions about their students with internet access beyond the school building. So it'll give you a flavor if you want to see, certain areas. I know certain folks that are joining us only cover certain geographic areas. We take that snapshot once a year, and obviously with non-traditional instruction that has happened, typically that was just a 10-day event during the course of a year. It has been extended beyond that, and districts have fine-tuned that. We took a snapshot of that also in June, but to update it a little bit to give us an updated flavor of it, and we're collecting that again now. So that will be the snapshot of a year ago. We also do a lot of broadcast interaction with our school districts. What you're going to hear me talk through is our Kentucky Board of Education heard it back on August 6th. Our districts heard it back on August 18th, and they also heard me talk about it on August 26th. So if you do KDE, Kentucky Department of Education media portal, then you will see a copy of those. And so obviously this is being recorded as well, but you'll hear it's a bigger picture. It's just not about this RFP. It's about education technology in our state. With the purpose of getting you a bigger picture. And the last item will give you a bigger picture if you do any search engine on KETS, the Kentucky Education Technology System Master Plan. So if you do KETS Master Plan, and we've done one from 2018 to 2024, it'll tell you where we've been and where we'd like to go. So I think that's a good background for anyone trying to get familiar with K-12. I know you all were part of K-12 at some time in some kind of capacity, but may not be very in tune with what's happening with education technology, specifically for K-12 students, which is different probably than some of you went to school because technology wasn't even there, but definitely has changed even as you left within the K-12 system. So the first part I want to make you all aware of is 100% of our school districts and our schools are connected to the internet by high-speed fiber already. Kentucky was the first state in the nation in 1995, and I wish a lot more Kentuckians were aware of this, to have every school district connected to the internet. If you go to that master plan, you will see we call it our greatest hits album. It's our historic timeline through KETS since 1992, and it'll show a lot of things that we're the very first in the nation and the very largest in the nation. We are the nation's leader in cloud-based computing. It was a reason we were able to pivot so quickly to virtual learning and also virtual telework in the Department of Education. The Department of Education was the first state agency that went 100% telecommuting because we have everything in the cloud. Every service, every manageable service we have, instructional, administrative, is already in the cloud, including our phone system. So it was a quick pivot for us to be able to do that. Same thing with our school systems. Almost every one of their instructional services, administrative, even technical, is already in the cloud. And so we've already been a power user of the internet for the student in the classroom quite some time. We know that districts have also, during this short period of time, have retrofitted, if they weren't already doing it, extending the bandwidth from the interior of the building to the exterior in their parking lots, mainly. The other key thing for us during this time is we had a lot of schools start yesterday, is our speeds for upload are the same for download for our school districts. As you know, for most of the homes, it is not that way. There's a significant difference between your download speeds and your upload speeds. The reason that was so important for us in K-12, and it wasn't planning for a pandemic, we never did it for that purpose, but it was be prepared for teachers to someday have in their toolbox, they would have a student in the classroom, but also they would be broadcasting out to a homebound student. Maybe it's broken their leg. Or for a variety of reasons, they don't have an extended absence from school. So we want to make sure the teachers had that capability to do that. And so over the past 5 months, we really made sure, and it came, yesterday, knock on wood, and this week so far, it's been really good with the speeds of teachers who have come to their classrooms, even though 80% of our school districts are not in person yet. 80% are doing virtual only. The other 20%, even if they started in person on the 24th or later than that, a percentage of them are also virtual. So we had to make sure if the teachers are coming to the classroom, which a high percentage of them are, is even though they don't have one student in the classroom, their ability to all broadcast out at the very same time for their classroom. Now, we are working with teachers, by the way, that's not a good technique to be broadcasting 7 straight hours in a virtual meeting. And it's called asynchronous learning. Maybe they open it up with the very first 5 minutes, and then the last 5 or 10 minutes they circle back with the work that they ask the student to do through their learning management system, which is also cloud-based. So we're trying to get teachers and homes frugal with the bandwidth that they already have. So we've been sending out, words of wisdom, just like here when I do any kind of a big virtual meeting across the state. Had it with all the CIOs, K-12 CIOs across the state yesterday. Is I got to make sure, first of all, my son isn't playing a video game. No one's watching a bunch of Netflix movies, because we're all trying to be frugal with what we already have. And the same thing as the power went out in this area, I have a backup generator, but I can't keep all the lights on and the microwave on and the hair dryers on at the same time. You got to be strategic about what you turn on and what you don't turn on. And the same thing is with this. We're trying to get on district's radar screen. Even though you can broadcast out at the same time, doesn't mean you should. It's not necessarily a best practice from a teaching perspective, but also they got to be aware of what's going on at the home level, to where there's multiple people trying to do something at the same time. And do you really need to put video out, which we all know video takes up a lot of bandwidth? And is it enough just to be able to hear their voices and maybe see something on the screen that's not video based in order to do instruction? So we're really trying to get them ready for this environment. But we do have what we call this initiative is the last mile internet to the student. And really note, I'm not saying to the home, I'm saying to the student, which I think is a very important distinction, because we know there's places. I grew up in Eastern Kentucky. My family's been there for a long time. There are places there that even if you have a hotspot, you're not getting 25 download and 3 upload. You will have to walk a certain distance or drive a certain distance, or hopefully we're just hoping it's a distance closer than you would have to drive all the way to the school building to use their internet within the school building or within their parking lot. So I think it's an important distinction that we're trying to make. We recognize, yes, it would be ideal to be able to get internet all the way to the living room of every home. The reality of that is by this August and September, that's an extremely low probability. And even in 5 or 10 years or beyond that, the probability of a last mile wired, particularly in declining populations, is a low probability. And I can speak firsthand from the areas that my families that are in Eastern Kentucky is. So we've told them if you have a last mile wired already, that's great. But if you don't, you may have to move to wireless until one is in place. And even for some families, even when a wire gets there, they may say, I'm just going to stay with this wireless solution that I have. But we know by this August and September, even those with planning to put the last mile wired in place, it's not going to meet a need probably for this school year, which I think most of you are familiar with. This school year is going to have a lot of virtual to it. Even the districts that start in person, there's a very high probability during the course of the year that they will be going totally virtual until they pass a quarantine and then go back with a portion of their students that are in quarantine, so they can go back in person when they can. So we've taken a look at the last mile wired. There's areas that it's there, but the students can't afford it. And I know that firsthand. If we take a look at where I grew up in Eastern Kentucky, and I compare it to the county I'm from in Johnson, but we also have a family farm in Breathitt County, and I take a look at one of the most urban places we have in Kentucky in Louisville, the percentages of students without it are very similar. And we've had that similarity around, 9, 10% for quite some time. And so if they have the ability to have it, this comes down to a money issue. Is a lot of these students are mainly from low income families that even though there's a last mile wired and even a last mile wireless, they can't afford it, which is very problematic for us during this school year for the students that currently don't have it to not be able to have that service at their house. And there's not going to be, and I always want to tell folks, there is no 100% solution to this. There's not, definitely not by August and September to try to address it. So we're trying to do our best to address, the 99% and not forgetting about the 1% that don't have it. But what can we do to get it as close to 100% as we can, understanding it is not going to go physically to everybody's living room. That is while we want that, that's a desired goal to have in the long term. It's not to be met in the very short term. And just the point is, this is not the solution that we're looking at here is not a whole home solution. It is a solution for K-12 students only, mainly of low income families. The whole home issue is I'm all for it. I understand the importance of it. It's just like, the farm we have in Breathitt County. It just recently got running water. We always had it from the wells, but a running water from real running water from a utility just came. It's taken a while. It's taken that long for running water to get there. So that's why you hear me kind of talk about, is there a way to reach these homes quicker? And it may be that they're not coming to the living room. They have to walk down a certain distance. Well, I'm at my mom's house in Johnson County. Is I have to walk, if I want a really good cell signal, I got to walk to the end of the driveway to get it. It's not going to be from her living room. I got to walk down to the end. So it's got to be that in mind that we're not going to, satisfy this 100% of reaching, every home and every living room, but also understanding, because this is not a whole home solution, it would be like putting that water line in Breathitt County in our farmhouse there that only I could use if I was a K-12 student. I understand that's a problem, that we really need a whole family solution, but really the funding that's been made available is only enough for the K-12 student. And so hopefully there's other funding sources and other initiatives that reach the whole home. And a lot of this is about how can we, at least for this school year, make the prices and services as good as they can be, given we're going to have a high percentage of our students in a virtual environment for a good part of this school year. Now, the thing that makes Kentucky different than the other 49 states, and this does surprise me, is we've been closely looking at the internet access to the home for over 15 to 20 years. I know, being a dad of 4, and I also have 4 current K-12 teachers. My mom was a beloved teacher in Johnson County, so I stay in touch with that quite some time. But I know what a significant and overwhelming advantage it is for a child to have internet access at home for educational purposes. And so, when we finish putting all the districts and having them connected in the schools, is we were interested what percentage of teachers could count on their children having internet access home so they can give assignments based upon that. So we've always been interested in that. Then 10 years ago, there was something called non-traditional instruction, and that was set up mainly for, to be honest with the Eastern Kentucky school districts. Having grown up there, and anyone that's from there spending time there understands, on a snow day, even though 90%, 95% of the county may be fine, the roads may be fine, the ice storm or the snowstorm that hit a certain curve that the sun did not hit makes it incredibly dangerous. A bus cannot drive over it. It would be catastrophic if the bus went over the hill and crashed, because you're dropping a pretty good distance in those cases. And I can speak firsthand. My mom was one of those victims years ago as a teacher, trying to get to school on a day that the teachers were coming in, but the students weren't, in a car accident that she still suffers the results of. She's fine, but it's always been there. So non-traditional instruction was a way for Eastern Kentucky districts mainly, although any district could take advantage of it, is to get credit for 10 instructional days. So they're still teaching. The students are at home. 95% of the county's roads are fine. The teachers are fine. The services are all up. And so they still taught that way, recognizing not 100% of the homes had had it or could afford it, even if it was there, so they could do it on paper. Obviously, not planning for a pandemic to where we have an extended beyond 10 days, which we had to finish the last school year, and we've been working so hard this year to try to make NTI a better experience. But we all know there is nothing like in-person teaching and learning. My oldest daughter is a kindergarten teacher. My son-in-law is a third grade teacher. Younger grades, it is really difficult to teach them virtually. Older grades, high school, even a lot of middle school, they can adapt pretty quickly, and we can do a lot of virtual of it. So everyone would desire in person. There's no doubt about it from a lot of different angles. But the situation that we're in, parents and even districts have chosen for a period of time to go virtual. So we've been tracking it for at least 10 years. No other state has, which I was surprised about. They are scrambling now and trying to get what those percentages are. I can tell you, as in tracking it in all these years, it was always between, and we fine-tuned it between 9 and 15%. We felt the 9% was closer because that's the answer we got when we directly asked the students and the parents. And we didn't ask it in a techno-widget way. We didn't say, can you do this meg or that meg? Do you have broadband? Those are terms that 99.99% of the population does not understand. We instead ask in a way, can you do the following types of things? If you needed to, could you watch a YouTube a video, and it was an instructional one? And so it gives people the feel for, well, I can do that and do that, so I have a high enough speed to do schoolwork, which I've also encouraged my peers, the other 49 states, to phrase it, not state it in a bits and bytes kind of terminology. We also have been working with design labs across the state with school districts. And these are superintendents and principals to see how, are the numbers about right? What we're finding is those that estimated, and we can call that a SWAG, that's a military term. I'm a former military officer. And that stands for scientific wild ass guess, if you want to know what that stands for, but it's based upon some best estimates based upon what you see, but you're not measuring it. So what we've seen during the time where a district really started to get intentional about measuring and identifying the students that had it and didn't have it, actually they had better percentages of student with it than they estimated. And they were estimated much worse, a very high percentage of the time. So we do think it was around before COVID-19, around this 9 or 10%. We have seen districts since then expend a variety of funding sources, including a couple that I'm going to tell you about, to try to address that. We think they've reduced that with that funding by half, from 10%, around 10% down to 5%. But it still may be up to 10%, but the worst we feel would be 10%. But we think they brought it down, and Jefferson County Schools bought 10,000 hotspots a while back. Covington Independent did something pretty innovative. They partnered, and they provided last mile wired, and they didn't put it in new. It was the families that already had it running by the house but couldn't afford it. So they paid for that for the families that couldn't afford it. And if they didn't have it last mile wired all the way to their house or near their house, they provided hotspots. And the Lincoln County Schools has just provided hotspots. And those are just examples of some. A few, like 3 that have done it. I don't know if there's been another 10, 20, 30, or 50 that have done it. But we're aware of it and we hear of it because as the time has gone on, it's got more real to districts of, I was considering it. We'll probably be back to, in person with 100% of our students. And it's got more real that at least there's going to be a percentage of parents that even when we get to a certain point to say, I want my child virtual the whole year, that we have to be prepared for. And it's problematic that if they don't have it and they're low income, what can we do to try to address that? I did ask my peer in Wisconsin, who's come the closest to Kentucky, to also trying to get some feedback on it. They're using about 5% of Wisconsin that is currently students that are without, and primarily those are low income students that we have in place. And we're appreciative of the other efforts that have done to fund this, as Goodwill and United Way have offered a way for school districts to pay their services, for a year. For the most part, we have seen companies on their own, and maybe it's competition without even having to do an RFP that they've done it, is saying, And some of it is goodwill by the companies, which we're asking you all to consider as well, at least for this next school year, is lowering it just for the K-12 students. I've known most of the plans, I've noticed it, and I talk with my peers once a week, my peer position across the United States, is we were seeing the cost for about $20 per month, unlimited. It was only if the school district bought it for most of these plans. I would ideally like, and this is not going to be part of this, is I hope that telcos can provide these costs across the country for families for this period of time to help us make it through the next year. Once again, this bid is only focused on K-12, but just like I told our Kentucky Board of Education, is I hope during this time that folks can offer these for families, particularly low-income families, that at a tremendously reduced price. But we've seen the offers that have been made by telecommunication companies across the country have been in that $20 range only for a K-12 student. It's not a whole family solution. It's unlimited. The goal is 25 down and 3 up. Understanding they may have to go to a location to actually get that, but at least they have capabilities, and knowing that a lot of classwork doesn't necessarily require those kind of speeds. The parts I also want to go over with you is some specific parts about how the money works, which I think is important that you'll be interested in, the funding sources that can go toward addressing this. When this first happened at the federal level, they allocated what we call CARES funds, and I can't remember what that long acronym stands for, but it's CARES, C-A-R-E-S, CARES funds. There's a couple of different flavor of those CARES funds. There's one called ESSER, and I can't remember the long thing that stands for. It's E-S-E-E-R. And that was about $174 million that went proportionally based upon, is close to their average daily attendance to the school districts. All school districts got a portion of that. Those could be used for a wide variety of things that help out with the COVID-19 situation, including anything related to technology that would help with the COVID-19 situation. And so things included with that we've seen districts spend it on is the computers, the laptops, the tablets. We've seen a very high percentage of them spend that if they didn't already have that in place. PD for their teachers, professional development of understanding how to teach in a virtual environment versus a pure classroom environment. And also they could use that money source for paying for the last mile internet for the student. So they've already had that choice, and they could actually go back and use any expenses they'd already paid by the time they got the approval to use that money back to March 13th, which is really the starting time for most of these types of flavors of money. Also, there is a portion of money called GEAR money. That was every governor's office across the United States was appropriated an amount of money that wasn't gone to every school district, but they could dedicate some very specific things that was to be used for. The GEAR funds in Kentucky were only to be used for two things. One is to help out with school feeding, and also to help out with distance and remote learning. The districts had the choice. They could spend 95% on school feeding and 5% on technology, so it wasn't a percentage they had to spend on it, or the other way around. And it could buy the things that we were talking about before. It could buy the tablets, the computers, professional development, and last mile internet for the student. There was a new flavor that was announced a couple of days ago. This is also CARES money. But let me make one distinction about those other two before I give you the distinction with this one. Those other two funding sources, the districts have up to September of 2021 to spend them. And so quite a bit of time out so they can think through the long term of it in doing that. And so there's a new flavor that was announced. It was for $8 million. This one also is very similar in a lot of different ways, but there's some differences between the other flavors of money that you need to be aware of. It is only for this purpose of the last mile internet for the student. The others it didn't have to be spent on that, the districts. For this one, it can only be spent on last mile internet solutions for students and nothing else. And so we've given some parameters of that districts in their assurances, and all districts have to sign assurances that the money that they've been have access to, they will only spend it for this purpose up to this amount. And so we're in the process now, and it's not it didn't take a lot of time. It's putting into a system that districts will look at. They've already signed one of these assurances. This is like a 1 or 2 sentences that basically talks about this is mainly an initiative for low-income students, homeless students, and it's an initiative to only provide last mile internet to those students. So it's very specific. That differs from the other two, even though the other two could be spent on technology. Much like the other flavor of it, it could go back to March 13th, which I think is an important part for you to be aware of that. So if the districts are expended it can go back in time to that. The difference between that and the other two flavors of money is it can only be spent up to December of 2020, and it can't pay forward. So if a district uses that pot of money, is they can't say, well, we're going to pay up through June of 2021. It would have been ideal if they could. I know there's intentions to try to extend that money beyond that time frame, but there's no 100% guarantee that it will be done. We don't know the odds are 50% or 70% we'll be able to do that, but we've told districts, and I told them don't count on it beyond December of December 31st as you're trying to do your planning. There's another wave of federal money that perhaps could be used for this. At the federal level, there's a difference between the House version and the Senate version. The House version is called HEROES, the other one's called HEALS. Both of them had money sources in there to help address the last mile to the student. The House version had $1.6 billion in it, and that's about $50 million that would have been for Kentucky. The other one had money for it, but didn't say how much was and specifically what it was. And so we know it'll take time for it to be agreement at the federal for that. So there's another potential funding source that can go toward addressing this last mile issue. As I mentioned before, assurances, we got that part underway. The technique, the way it works, is the district has to pay for it first out of some other funding source. They send a reimbursement in for that assures it went for that specific purpose, the last mile for the internet for the student, in this case, for the $8 million, and only for the appropriation that they were given. And we have a way that we're identifying the percentage each district will get is based upon their average daily attendance, along with their free and reduced lunch. And so it's not the same percentage that every district gets. It's going to be weighted for a heavier percentage if they have free and reduced lunch students within their district versus those that do not have it in place. You would say that the piece that's also unique about this one is the filtering requirement in our school districts, and that's part of the bid that you saw, is because you're dealing with children under 18 and even 18. There was a state law passed in 1998 that required filtering, and so for us, when we provide that service, the Department of Education provides that service for all 171 school districts. Because of the law, and there's also a federal law, because the contract we use for the school districts within the buildings is E-rate eligible. This one is not. This one has nothing to do with E-rate. E-rate doesn't cover anything outside the school campus. We require internet content management. It's not. We don't pick the sites at the Department of Education level. The school districts do. We have a service called Lightspeed. And the technique that districts are doing to address this within there is let me give you an example of a hotspot. If they buy a standalone hotspot, even though they could use the hotspot that's built within the smartphone, is they're configuring it so only the district's issued laptop or tablet can get on that hotspot. So it's not a whole family solution for every device they have. And on that device, they can only be pointed to the Lightspeed service. And so the plus side of all that, Stacey, you got something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to, during our chat, we noticed that we are getting some information from the participants that may have to get off at 11 o'clock. So I didn't know if you wanted to give them a couple minutes to ask some questions for those individuals.
Sure do, but some of this is I'm going to try to preclude them having to ask some questions because I'm giving them the upfront. And so I just want you where there's a filtering requirement to it. That's involved with it. So I can pause right there and take questions that you would have. And I'm willing to stay on here for those that, even if you have to leave at 11, I'll be here, for whoever that you have. So those that have a shot clock of 11 o'clock can leave. Those that don't, hang around.
Thank you, David. This is John Finelli. I have a question with Hughes Network Systems. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Great. Thank you, David. Hey, a question regarding the filtering that you were just referring to. I believe that's probably referring to as Sipa or CIPA. Now, if the provider is providing some type of a modem at the site, at the individual home student, not home, but the student's residence, and are you indicating that the modem needs to be able to do that filtering, or will a VPN be put in place to bring them back to the network, and then the VPN will do the filtering? And then I have a follow-up based on the answer.
Well, we'll answer that. That's a super technical question that we'd probably answer to everyone. I can just tell you the technique. And it's going to be easier to do this with, for example, a standalone hotspot than these other services. And so, for example, if it's a last mile wired, it's more difficult to do that. If you're taking advantage of the student's smartphone hotspot capabilities, it's more difficult to point it to a place. And I was just giving you an example is typically when a state service is paying for a internet to a school, there's a responsibility there. It's more than if the parent was paying for it. We had districts with the Chromebook, for example, it's an example, pointing to the Lightspeed device. People on the other part of the household could go do a lot of different things that weren't appropriate for K-12, right? Because the parent's paying for it. I do think it's a different step where you have a state paying for a service, an internet service that you're really making sure the best you can is being used for appropriate K-12 related things. Like I say, the way districts handled this before, even if they sent a Chromebook to the house and the parent was paying for it, that Chromebook could only go to K-12 related things. In this case, with the district with a hotspot, is the way they're doing it is even if they have an older 20-year-old brother that says, I want on it, give me your passwords to get on your Chromebook, they're probably not going to be very happy with the things they can get to because they're only K-12. They can't go to combat games. They can't go to watch a bunch of Netflix movies or things that 20-year-olds would want to watch that's not appropriate for younger than that. So there's a way that districts are handling. It's a normal technique that they're handling it. So obviously we're interested in all types of wireless, just not hotspot. The satellite, because we recognize there's certain homes a hotspot does not reach. Satellite can. And it may be years or never that a last mile wired reaches that house. And so that's why we want the complete toolbox in there. We recognize the filtering piece is more difficult for non-pure standalone devices. And so obviously we would encourage district to try to find a way to point to that even for if it's set up in another family member get out, they're not to be very happy with the things they can get to because they're only K-12 related. That the district has selected. So we recognize that's a more difficult piece. The easier one to get is the standalone hotspot where the Chromebook is only get on that hotspot and it goes up. The other ones are more difficult to do that and you don't see a requirement. In my estimation, it will not be 100% requirement, but you will see the districts that buy these services because that's the part here. The Department of Education is not to be picking this. The districts are. And the districts already have a plan for it. They've already identified who the low income students are. They currently don't have it without, so they'll make those calls, and they have a wide variety of ways they can do that. One is issuing a hotspot. One is, they're putting a hotspot on a bus. The other one is a community center that's set up in a community center, not for the whole community, but only the low-income student can get on it. K-12 student can get on. I think there's a place that did that with fire stations. So a student that was near a fire station get on. So we're going to recognize all the different kind of solutions that are within these parameters, but take advantage of something that's already in place for students to do. So. The specific technical part of that, I'm just, be honest with you, I suspect for every district, they'll want to have a discussion with you about how they do that and if they can do that. It won't be our requirement that, it'd be ideal if the satellite service or ideal if the last mile wired was pointing to, it didn't have to be Lightspeed, but something that is K-12 content. And friendly versus anything in the gamut someone would want to do.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked that question, sorry, real quick, is one of in the scope of work, item number 2 under B is evidence of Sipa. And that's the only reason why I'm asking that question. So if there is no evidence of Sipa, does that automatically make it a non-starter?
Michael, you answered that one. I didn't know the Sipa one was still in there. To us, to be honest with you, Sipa mainly for y'all are aware of it is mainly a federal requirement, and it's mainly for E-rate purposes, right? If you're going to get E-rate discounts and rebates, you have to follow Sipa. This is not an E-rate eligible contract. It goes to the home. This does not fall within what E-rate does. And so that's why I always mainly reference the Kentucky law in 1998 that talked about, the safety and security of students when they're using the internet services provided by the school district in the school buildings. And so that's a word, advice that maybe I need to take the Sipa part out, because Sipa is mainly around, to me, it's around E-rate and a federal requirement. The more important one to us is the state requirement that was put in place actually before Sipa went into place.
So should that be submitted a question, because it sounds like Sipa should not be in there as a requirement? Is that correct?
Mike, I'll let you say, because I know when we were discussing
Document that question and send it to us, and we'll make sure that we provide clarification on that, because that would not be applicable the way it's being said there.
I would agree with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Who else had a question? And if you do, just raise your hand. I'm not looking at the chat unless there's something coming up in the chat where someone has it. One of the things that was asked to me yesterday by the districts, and it was a good question. Why wouldn't a district want to do this? And I've mentioned to you a variety of funding sources. I think they were talking about the $8 million funding source in particular. The biggest apprehension we found with districts about paying for the last mile for the student is the ongoing costs. I would say that is by far the biggest apprehension. They want to do it, but the funding sources, as most of you know, maybe you're not aware of, since 2008, we've been on a downward trend of funding ever since the mortgage crisis, happened. And it's not just Kentucky, it's across the United States, but a lot less money is available now than it was in 2008. And we know there's definitely this interest in trying to reach all the students, no matter where they may be at. But the concern with the CARES money is a temporary funding source. As I said before, the CARES money runs out in 2021. This one runs out, the $8 million runs out in 2020. The Senate version of the next round of federal relief had a very short time frame on it. I want to say it had 5 months to be spent. The House version had a lot longer a period of time, but who knows when that would be done. And at the end of all that, even if it's for 2 years, the districts are, if I put this in for a fifth grader and the money runs out, that student and parent will be very upset when on their eighth grade year, I got to pull it out because they're used to it. And so that's a real issue within a district. And obviously, if we get the price points down, and I hope for a period of time you can. We have the goal of getting it down to $10. The reason $10 is that it'll make the dollar go a lot longer. But just in general, if you can get down to $10 for anybody, for any K-12 student, and it really is beyond just the ones that we're talking about that currently don't have it, and for the families. And this is not for families to buy off of directly, but this is just me, asking if you can do beyond the family. There's a federal lifeline program. That comes very close to $10. It's $9.25. It's for wired, last mile wired or wireless. And so for those parents, at least for the next year, it makes a doable way. As you know, this RFP is structured in a way that the prices that you provide this year, you don't necessarily, we would like you to keep them forever. I don't want to take away your motivation to do that, but it's really, we revisit it every year. And we may be doing a part of this even next year. I hope not. But it really was, you're not locked in to the prices you're giving for year 1, year 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever we have there. We would like a legal purchasing mechanism for districts to be able to purchase off of for a time, but that they don't want to have to do a local bid. As they pick these, there's a consistency across the state. We're leveraging, the whole state. We do state contracts all the time. And the benefit of that is legal purchase mechanism, but also we're leveraging the buying power of the entire state to help drive down costs and get consistency in services for, be honest with those tiny districts, where a district, a vendor may say, well, you don't have that much buying power. You're out here, you're a very rural district, you're very poor. I'm more motivated to lower prices for districts that are larger, that have more money. And so that's what a whole part of KETS has been. And some of you may never been on a KETS contract before. And some of you are part of our greatest hits album over the years of helping us do some things, I'm sure. But part of it was consistency across the state to help those that are poorer, smaller, and in most cases more rural, have a chance to have the same kind of pricing you would get if you were in a very wealthy district. And so that was the equity that we've tried to do, and equality that we've tried to do since 1992. That was part of CARA, the Kentucky Education Reform Act, which was part of KETS. So what we found over the years is we don't have vendors, we have partners. The ones that do best with us, they understand that there's a difference between those two. A partner helps you do some things in a short period of time because of the cause of what you're trying to do. A vendor, you know, and I'm not opposed to making money, but it's mainly a money thing. And they may just propose things that aren't really a good solution, but it makes money, you know, and that part of that. Our partners have always with K-12 through the course of 1992 since I began, is there's been a willingness to reduce the pricing for K-12, particularly Kentucky K-12. Most of the pricing we have is the best in the United States, even compared to K-12s, because we're leveraging the entire state of the bargaining power. But people understand, if you take a look at us, if you're brand new to us and say, how are they really different from other states? Take a look at that, those historic achievements at that in the master plan. If you do KETS master plan, KETS timeline, take a look at that over 28 years, what we've been doing, and even what we've done in the past 2 years. You can see this is different than the other 49 states, and different in a very good way, which I'm very proud of. We're far from perfect. This has always been a passion, you know, for me to try to do last mile for the student, and going the last mile for the student, which I think most of our folks have. This really does go take it to another level, a last mile during this virtual environment that's with outside the school building. Mike, is there anything that you would like to add to this as background that I've covered with the districts and covered with the state board that I didn't cover here that may be helpful to them?
I don't think so. I mean, I think you covered a lot of territory there, and we certainly want to make sure we provide the opportunity for them to get to get their questions in, of any clarifications of what they've looked at in the RFP that's been published.
Mike,
Hi,
oh, go ahead. Please go ahead. Sorry.
This is Jim Phipps with MediaCom. Do have a couple of questions, if I could please. On this, you mentioned this is district by district. Would we be required to provide to the whole state, or would we?
No. Okay,
so no on that. And is there anything on connection and construction recovery cost?
No.
No. Okay. All right.
This is, you're just providing a cost. You know, all the things you got to do behind the scenes to get a service in place. That's, you know, the district is ideally paying $10 a month per student for that. It is not for build out. It's not for all that. That's something that you would have to eat internally. The district would not see or feel any of those costs. And if you go back to your first question, we do want to get something that covers the entire state. It's not the same vendor. There's no solution that covers 100%. Just like our high-speed network that we have that for all the school districts, that's a consortium of like 18 different telcos working together, because there's not one telco that covers the entire state. It takes 18 of them. Sure. So this one's going to have a higher number of vendors than we typically have on a contract. Typically we get a prime, and the prime handles all this, but there wasn't enough time to do that. So we're going to have individual folks, and obviously we would encourage those that can go beyond to go beyond. But there's some that they just serve a certain geographic area. But we're going to be making sure, looking at, and we can't require it obviously, is try to make sure every geographic area has at least one solution, and it's not to the home, it's to the student. Understanding they may have to move a distance away from them, drive it or walk it to access the service, which they can't from their home.
To clarify that a little bit further, I think this is to maximize things that are existing, that you have the capability of providing today. It's just being able to do that at a more affordable cost for these particular students and in this particular category group. And then also, just to clarify, as far as providing, we're not identifying anything that says you have to be able to provide this service across the entire state. But the RFP does say for whatever it is that you do offer in whatever the geographical area that you offer it, that it would be the same cost to any students that's offered to through their district. That you do have one cost that's applicable to the geographical area that you cover.
And I would say too, and I think it's important to the group, is and everyone has their bureaucracies internally. Obviously, if you already have a structure in your company that already offers these costs unlimited, and you have a solution. We understand that can be very fast, that you can respond to this. However, if you do not already have it agreed in your company that, boy, we want to get down to $10, maybe it's 15, maybe it's 12, and it takes a lot of wickets for you to work through to do that and convince people to do that. We understand that takes longer to do that, and so that's why this one's structured to understand there's some that can respond very quickly, and there's some that will have to, in a lot of cases, battle with the internal bureaucracy of your companies. And that's not a 1 or 2 hour thing. Sometimes it takes a longer time to do that. And we're familiar with that. Not that we don't have bureaucracy in our organization, as everyone does, but we understand the battles that we have. But you're also not, this is mainly, and it's mainly not to put in new infrastructure. It's the battles of the stuff that you already have to lower it from this amount to this amount. That's going to be probably the bigger battle, not to put a bunch of new stuff in.
Okay. Oh, that makes a lot of sense, because we do have a couple contracts with school districts in Kentucky and hundreds throughout the other states, where for low-income families, where the school is bulking them, and for anybody that we can service and giving a standard price. So sounds exactly what you're trying to do here. So okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question from one earlier, or something that was mentioned earlier, David. Does a state contract need to be in, I'm sorry, John Finelli from Hughes. Does a state contract need to be in place with the state in order to be awarded a contract within this RFP? Do we have to be a contract holder already to be able to?
No.
Okay. And then the second question is, as you know, broadband is a best effort type of a solution. And if 25/3 is not consistently met, because of course the demand of, whether it's satellite or whether it's broadband or other types of broadband, if it's a best effort solution, that would be acceptable?
Yeah, obviously we want you to try to do your best and your best effort. But I recognize, having grown up in those areas, and I'm in them all the time, that you have to sometimes move to an area that you can't get it. And I've talked with my peers of other states. There's 2 other states that are going down this path about they have a part in their state that can't get it. Now, would we want it? Absolutely. Is it better than nothing? Yes, it is. And that's why this is different. For those who've been on our contracts before, we're usually pretty hard line about a spec and a time frame, and even the number of folks there. So a lot of this is trying to get folks across the finish line. Is different than anyone I've done in 28 years and an 8-year at the state level and at the federal level. But it's trying to address this immediate need. And, we understand that it's not going to be 100%. That's why I say 100% perfect. There's a lot of schoolwork that does not require 25/3. But so there will be the understanding that do we want you to try to provide that? Absolutely. We wanted to give you the feeling for, too, that this, and I was hoping this would make a difference, that this is not a whole household solution, that they're going to be watching a bunch of, playing a bunch of games watching a bunch of Netflix movies at the same time for. So as you're trying to think about the bandwidth and taking that consideration, we're trying to this is really a K-12 solution. And we're really hoping that we can make it to anyone trying to use it beyond K-12 is very disappointed and therefore does not want to get on it. And it's used for what it was intended for, which doesn't require a lot more bandwidth than is really needed.
Thank you.
But I do want to make clear, and I want to make things your understanding is obviously, is you're not already on a state contract, and that's the reason why this is going out to a broad group. There's a good number of you that is not already on a state contract, that this would be for that. So if you're if we had every vendor we ever wanted on an existing state contract, the method would probably be different. We probably wouldn't be doing an RFP. We'd probably be having individual discussions with all those vendors, say, can you reduce it down versus doing a bid? Another state took that approach. They didn't let those that currently did not have a state contract on it. I did not want to take that approach. I wanted to give everyone a shot at this in every kind of different way, wired, wireless, all the different variables to be able to meet that, even if you weren't currently on a state contract.
Thank you, David.
Welcome. Yeah, Carrie.
Hi, my name is Carrie Richardson. I'm with C2 Strategic Communications out of Louisville. So I'm asking about how you expect these groups to connect with the individual students or those individual families. How do you plan to ensure that they are connecting with the right students, the right households to get this into their hands? I know you mentioned that the districts have identified some of them, but is there a mechanism, a report back for you to ensure that we are connecting with that remaining 5%?
Well, it's not going to go in that detail. Obviously, we like a lot of things we do, we have to count on districts to do it. They have to report back. First of all, they spent the money on this, and there's assurances are signed. These are for low income and homeless students. Are there people that will cross that line and not be truthful with it? You're not going to get 100%, 100%, 100%. I always tell folks, there's no 100%. You will always have a percentage of folks that will cross lines and do things they shouldn't do. But the intention is, the goodwill intention of this is, which I don't want to cloud the 1% thing or 1% thing that tends to make the news, is I think 99% of this at least will be spent on the right thing for the right reasons. We can't put every precaution in place. We're not going to go to every household and say, it was them, they're low income. They'll have to answer their own districts about that if they have people crossing that line, and give it to the people that did have means and instead paid for it. That's a 1% of a 1%. But we know we all have to get, people are concerned about that because that's a tendency that makes the news, right? And it clouds when those come out. The news sources don't say, well, that was a 1% of 1% thing. They get the impression, well, that's happening 99% of the time. So, but I do have, being from there in Jefferson County, they've spent quite a bit of time trying to identify the students. And school districts, which you may not be familiar with, they have family resource use service centers, right, that are also very in tune with the poorest kids. And my mom helped establish the one in Johnson County. So I'm very familiar with the great deeds, the good deeds those folks. And if it's like much anything, my mom always tells me no good deed goes unpunished.
Right.
And so all the good deeds we're trying to do here for the last mile for students, I'm sure there are repercussions of that, but I'm willing to take that. And I think most districts are. This is really focused. I mean, you don't want to have a pandemic, but trying to get last mile on the radar screen of folks. This has helped like nothing else over the past years. The importance of digital being part of the teacher's toolbox. This has really helped, and I hope it stays after the pandemic calms down quite a bit. But there are free and reduced lunch is a pretty well-defined thing in school districts, and low income, and so they already have a pretty good way to do that. And plus, they're signing an assurance that is go to these students, but we are not going to go and say, can I see a list of those names and confirm it? But I'm sure there'll be lines crossed, But I'm only look at people trying to do the right things. I think for the most part, and that probably hurts me in the long term, I think people are generally good and try and do the right things. But you always will have some knuckleheads.
Well, I just want to make sure I understand how you see the individual providers interfacing with this population. Is this something where you would recommend that the providers are working with Friskies or working with school counselors to ensure that they are connecting directly? Or is this an advertising campaign to make sure that we've got that 5% connected?
Well, there's two things. One of the reasons I mentioned it earlier is just so you kind of know what the gaps are in the districts, so that the digital the digital readiness report will kind of give you a feel for, really for most districts, they all have a CIO, a chief information officer, just like I am for the state. And that's why I briefed them yesterday. For the most part, they will be the point person for this for the organization. By the way, if I get a call from any parent, I told them yesterday, I'm pointing them to you CIO. And obviously, if for those that are responding to the bid and have services, because there'll be multiple service providers for certain areas, then you will have to go make your case to that leadership, because they're going to come up with pretty much an approach, for the district that they want to have. And Covington, like I said, was a mixture. It was a mixture of an existing last mile that was already by the homes of these low-income families, but they just couldn't afford it. So they took off and paid for that. The ones that didn't, they put a hotspot in. But they knew who those families were, and if anything has helped fine-tune it, we, for example, Jefferson County and Fayette County, our two largest districts, weren't part of the NTI before. They didn't do it. So this was a whole new thing to them doing NTI. And definitely when they signed up for it, and they didn't expect to be doing it this long. So it has required them, not that they already didn't have a good feel for it, really required them to fine tune who is it that we're not reaching yet. I'm pretty sure they're going to have
to clarify her question there. I mean, and the providers are doing business with the school districts. The school districts are identifying who the recipients of these services will be. They will identify who those are. The school districts are actually doing the purchasing. So the providers will work with the districts, as David was saying. The chief information officer is ideally the most likely will be the point person for that. So that's who the private providers will work with. So the districts have the responsibility of identifying where these services are to be provided to who, and making the choice of which provider can provide that best.
And to be honest with you, a good number of districts are already down this path. They have a plan. I mean, they've already got a plan, and they are already having those communications with the folks, the Friskies folks, as we call them, resource use service centers is called Friskies, and so they already have that down. They've already identified that. The ones we're trying to move the needle with this, to be honest with you, and I told the districts this yesterday, is the districts that haven't moved on this as much as they should or at all. Obviously, the districts that'll be really happy, for example, about the $8 million announcement are the ones that were already moving on it. I know a pretty large district is getting ready to announce, about 2,000 hotspots. They'll be thrilled about this because that $8 million for their portion of that for 5 months, they weren't counting on that at all. But it's the ones that we're hoping we get movement on that didn't move. But I told you the apprehension they have is, well, this pays for half a school year. I don't want, someone madder than, a hornet that the other half is not paid for unless I have a funding source that can pay for that second half of the school year. Now, obviously, the other flavors of CARES money I told you about, the ESSER and GEAR can do that, but they may have already obligated that for something else. And so they don't have something to take the place that second half of the school year. So the more attractive your all's prices can be to do some pretty high-end services unlimited, is as much speed as we can, close to 25.3. We're going to get a lot of those because that money can go further. And even if they say, I don't have enough money to sustain it, they may be more willing to do it, for at least for this year, knowing that it doesn't lock you into those prices beyond this year.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
David, is there a period of performance? John Finelli Hughes, is there a period of performance? I know you just mentioned end of this year. Is there a period of performance that you would be looking for, or are you just looking for an open-ended monthly recurring type of a charge associated with the service?
Well, I think these are probably monthly and annually, didn't we, Mike? And just I think those are the two choices. Did we give both a monthly and annual choice here, Mike?
We identified this as a monthly service charge, and we considered doing the annual, but and we can still consider that if that's something that is needed to be identified. That got kind of, obviously David discussed as far as when it came to the funding sources and the changes in the funding sources. So the way we have it right now, I don't think, and Stacey, you clarify for me, I see you're jumping on here. Did we add the annual option? Okay,
Yes,
so the annual option is on there now, so it's monthly and annual, two different options that can be provided.
And I think he's also questioning, and tell me if I'm wrong, is obviously we have a lot of contracts we do with District Ed Tech over the past 25 years, and we don't want folks that just saying stuff they'll do it and they can't do it. So obviously, if there's gets a point with any of the respondents and they mainly talk the big talk but can't walk it, then we circle back to them. We don't have, well, we'll take a look at these. I don't think so in this one. And we can talk about that when if, everybody's kind of on probation for the first 2 or 3 months and then it's for real. I mean, I don't know if we have that in this one or not, Mike. We do that. We've had that with some other ones, but be honest with you is because I wanted to lay out some longer term money to you beyond the 8 million, which I think is important, is so some people could play a game. So I want to go after the 8 million, but you could really hurt yourself in the longer term if you play that game. You clearly can't walk the talk because there's other CARES funding sources, and I really do think there'll be another round of federal funds for LEAF funds that will address the last mile to the student. So I'm hoping every provider is just not saying, well, there's a $5 million, there's an $8 million pot, then I'm going to go after what I can for 5 months, and then if I don't do well, that's no big deal. Is I think it hurts you in the long term with districts since it's a 5-year contract. So, Mike, I'm not aware of a performance period that they got to perform their probationary period before we award, right?
No, we wouldn't have anything like that on this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
This is Jerry with Spectrum Enterprise. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Hey, Jerry.
Good. So I guess then from what you just said, we could propose a 12-month term, but there's really only funding for the next 3 months. And so the schools would enter a contract with us for 12 months, but not have funds to fulfill it.
Well, okay, so I went over the different flavors of money. There's different flavors. There's some that last 12 months and there's some that last less than that. And I may have to go inside. I feel raindrops here. So you may have to go off the line here. So they do have actually money. Districts have money that lasts an entire school year. This flavor can only last for 5 months. But they would have to identify, if they entered into an annual contract, obviously they would have to find one that lasted longer than 5 months. Mike, I'm to go off the line here. I have to go inside because I'm outside here.
Just to clarify that answer, it by all means is not limited to that they could enter into an annual agreement and identify multiple funding sources they're going to use. And obviously the district will have the responsibility of doing that and be accountable to do that. And we anticipate they will do that. As David's mentioned, we've got funding sources that have been identified. A big something that kind of catapulted this forward was the fact that this additional money was identified that does have a duration through December. And we're hoping that it will catapult some districts to move forward with assisting and providing this service that was not doing it. And then the ones that already were, obviously, will be able to help them to do it more completely and to be able to utilize the funds that they were using in other ways. So we absolutely expect that districts are going to be addressing this using multiple funding sources, the existing ones as well as additional ones that are going to be coming forward as we move along. So we don't see that there's going to be a bit, but it ultimately is a valid question. Districts will have to identify what kind of agreements they're looking to enter into, whether it's a monthly or an annual agreement for the services that they want to put in place.
So as a completely unrelated question, of course, it's a very short turnaround to get these answers. And this is a full-blown RFP, so there's multiple documents that have to be signed and notarized. And we have a lot of people in a lot of different states that need to sign things, and a lot of them are working from home as well. So is there going to be any kind of extension to get everything signed and notarized to put in?
Yeah, Stacey, you can answer. I see you jumped on.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I just want to, that's a wonderful question. Your notary, due to the pandemic, the finance cabinet has, you do not have to get your stuff notarized at this time. You do have to get signatures, but the notary that part has been lifted.
So another clarification, Stacey, I'd want us to go ahead and make there is that this RFP has a date by which you can respond initially, and then you will have the ability to respond after that date as well. There for all intents and purposes, is a window of time. So September 1st, I think, is our target initial date now, or not? Maybe it is September 1st.
Yes, sir, it is. So,
and then we identified through December that we would take responses to this RFP, knowing that some respondents are not going to be able to turn it around as quickly. So if it takes them till the middle of October to respond, I mean, they still will have the ability to respond and get a contract put in place, which again will be valid from that point moving forward, just like the rest of them as they're awarded. So that was the idea, that was to create a window of time by which these RFPs can come in and be reviewed and awarded.
That is correct.
So does that, John Finelli Hughes, so that basically means phase one means if you receive RFP responses by the phase one deadline, you'll be able to start awarding. However, if you did not respond to the phase one timeframe, you still have until the phase two timeframe to still be able to submit a response, even if you did not do one in phase one.
That would be correct.
Okay. And if it's a sunny day on a Tuesday, then that was too many ifs there. Sorry about that, but I wanted to make sure it was clear. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very important point. We don't want anybody to think that if they're not able to do something by September 1st that they're out. Again, that window of time, we obviously very purposely did that, knowing that because it's such a quick turnaround time. Those that can quickly turn around time, that's great. Those that it will take a little longer for them to be able to put some things in place that will allow them to provide this service in a more cost-effective manner on behalf of K through 12, we certainly want them to have that more time than it may take for them to do that.
And obviously, the advantage of doing it earlier, Mike, that's why I was talking about a little bit a while ago about the bureaucracies of your companies. But obviously, the companies are able to turn that very quickly around with the bureaucracy of the company. Will have, I think, an edge on going and meeting with or having discussions with the district leadership, let's say the CIO, to say we already have something in place. It does the following kind of things. It's got this cost. It makes the kind of things that you're looking for as far as speed and unlimited data caps, and so you would have an edge. And so we want to encourage you to try to break through the bureaucracies of your company, but we understand the difficulty of doing that. But at the same time, those that could are already ready to do it. And that may be part of a company. The same company can go immediately with their last mile wired solution, but it may take 2 months for them to get their wireless approved, because they're asking, the price to be reduced, not to put it in place. It's just the bureaucracy. The company has already agreed to a last mile wired cost, but their last mile wireless is going to be a battle.
And this is Jerry again with Spectrum. So the RFP states that something about the Q&A period, if there's objections, that has to be in by 3:30 today. I think we're still working on those, or at least trying to define those. Is that a firm date? Is 3:30 today?
For your questions for today, sir, is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Yes, sir, it is. That is very firm. They are due at 3:30 today. We have to have them posted by tomorrow night.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Jim Phipps of MediaCom. One more thing. I asked earlier if this was statewide or district by district, and you answered that well. But whenever we're looking at a certain district, are we required to provide to everybody in the school district? Or are there, meaning if say we don't have a wired or a wireless solution to everybody?
So I would answer that by saying we would ask that you provide the service where you're capable of providing the service. So
Okay.
if you happen to have a situation where there's a district or a school district that you're able to provide the service in part of that district but not in another part, then we would certainly want to still be able to utilize that service where you're able to provide it.
Okay.
So yeah, I would say there's not a limitation on that.
And there might be a mixture. Mike, you're giving a good example of one provider. Let's say they're a hotspot provider, works in 90% of the county, but there's 10% the hotspot doesn't reach. So it may be another hotspot provider, or maybe a satellite provider, or a last mile wired provider that addresses that. So districts are already, they're not, well, any place is ideal to have one. I gave an example of Covington. They use a multiple. They use the last mile wired and wireless to cover it. So we foresee, it being, a variety of them, with the goal of trying to reach, as best we can, no matter where the student's at, understanding that student, even with all these options, may still have to walk a distance or drive a distance or go, to another family member's house to use it, but hopefully not have to come all the way back to the school building.
Okay, thank you.
I see someone's hand up. I can't tell who's that. Is it John? John and one other.
This is Michael Flood from Khajiit. So a question that I had, you mentioned that there's both a monthly option and an annual option. I saw that in the RFP document itself. Is there interest or an option to also provide other terms? So for example, a 4-month or a 6-month, bundle, given that you want the hardware and, covered in the cost of the solution. So amortizing that hardware cost out, may require a certain term of service commitment from the district, and that may change the price, whether it's a short-term commitment or a long-term commitment.
Yeah, I'll just answer. I would suspect the monthly cost is not as good as the annual cost, and that's just common sense. I wouldn't have expected those or demanded that those be the same if you take the monthly and they ramp up, because understanding there'll be certain parts, and it is typical that a district, my understanding is they sign at least an annual agreement. in doing that. So, but I don't think I have an interest in any kind of increments. Me personally, we can discuss it internally, Mike, afterward, of doing a 4-month and a 5-month and I think a monthly is good enough, and then annual, I would just say right off. And you'll see in the notes after when we change it, but I don't see a need to have anything beyond a monthly and an annual.
Thank you. Many of our school districts do purchase on an academic year basis instead of a calendar year basis. Just
Yeah,
that's what I say.
that's what was coming to mind as you were asking that, was did we need to consider something that did take into consider the school year? I would ask that you submit a question on that so that we can consider whether we need to make an adjustment to that or not. I mean, obviously we've captured what you said there. I just want to make sure that we do examine that and make sure we don't cut ourselves short for both you, the providers, as well as our school districts and the recipients of this.
The difficult part makes it with all this is a school year in a normal time ends at a certain date. We understood last year, and we don't know what we've got ahead with COVID-19, to be honest with you, is do we need to do this all the way to the beginning of July through July? And so that's my hesitancy with it. Typically, when I say, I was thinking, we always typically think in school years, but at least annually. Mike, we can follow up with the districts that have already signed contract. I'm pretty sure they signed an annual contract that was for 12 months. It wasn't for just the school year. I know there's been interest in certain ones that say, well, during the summertime, make that less. Need to take in consideration since students are really using that a whole lot less for academic purposes. But we can discuss internally. But I'm pretty sure those that have already signed it have been for an entire year. Understanding that just like we do when we pay for internet service school districts, as a part of the year, it's not maximized like it is the other 10 months. And those of you that have signed agreements with school districts can speak up and tell us otherwise, that you do them for 10 months or 99% of the time it's for 10 months. But my understanding is 95% of the time, maybe 99%, is for an entire 12 months.
This is Jim Phipps at MediaCom. A vast majority of the time we do 12-month deals, and the other portion is month to month.
You're right. Yeah. So we'll talk about it internally, but I would say this will be for a 12-month and monthly. Getting into other variations would be difficult, but we'll consider it, say, for the rest of the school year kind of thing. We'll talk about it internally. Thanks. So John, I still see your hand up. Is your hand still up?
It is. Thank you. Okay. Good morning. John Gardner with Comcast. David, I heard you say about a number of the terms that you're not expecting things to be 100%. And one of the things that the proposal or the request speaks to is unlimited data and a desire to get to unlimited data. So I'd still like to confirm that is a negotiable point. That's not a hard and fast, must be unlimited data.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's negotiable, but I want to make sure that companies give their best effort to do that, because I know it doesn't take you long to look at the news. We are overwhelmed with the virtual, and we really want to make sure the student, can do virtual for the entire month and not reach a data cap halfway through the month. And the assurances we're trying to give you is, if we have a certain way to really making sure they're only going to K-12 sites, that other family members won't get on it and try to use it for a bunch of other things, which will help you stay within all the kind of bandwidth that you're trying to manage behind the scenes. So it is a goal, absolutely is a goal. We want you to do your best with the company, because it puts, and obviously at the end of the day, if the district has two choices and they say one's unlimited with the understanding of this and one has got the data caps, and they're about the same in cost, I would suspect they would go with one that was unlimited. I hope they really can do unlimited when they say it, but that is a negotiable thing, as I remember, right, Mike? I mean, we didn't say thou shalt.
That's correct. We want the providers to try and reach that goal, but certainly understand that there could be instances where, and ultimately you're going to provide what it is that you're able to offer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. One other follow-up question. Under pricing, it refers to providing on-site support for every local school district. What do you mean by that? On-site support.
Well, it's not physically on site. I mean, so yeah, we'll have to take a look at that wording. I'll have to look at it specifically, but essentially what we want to be available is support for whatever services put in place, similar to the support you would provide otherwise to a customer.
Okay.
Yeah, and we recognize most of the time they'll be telephonic, but here's the reality of it is the school district staff, and if you go to our master plan, you'll see something called the people side of education technology. And what we identify in there, they're tremendously understaffed. And so they weren't staffed to handle, being a help desk service or a break fix service for last mile to the student outside the school building. And so the calls, if there's something not working, what they say there's a hotspot, I'll just use that as an example. We would expect that the technology staff of the district is not trying to fix that. That whoever, just like as Mike said, to the regular service provider, they would call, let's say that student would call and say, my hotspot's not working. It's not this district staff is involved with trying to fix it. Just like here at my house, is I don't call Woodford County, I call, the provider to say the internet's down and try to talk to them about it. So that's the reason behind that wording, the intent behind it, but it's not to actually go physically on site.
Very good. Thank you.
Welcome. And I don't see any other questions in the chat window. And John, I think you still have your hand up. You may want to lower it unless you still have another question.
You know what? Actually, we do.
Okay.
In the RFP, it says that we're to have one point of contact. Is that per school district or across all school districts?
So I'll have to, we undoubtedly want one point of contact for the contract. You certainly can have multiple people that would work with different districts. So I'm trying to think of where that wording's at, but
well, typically, Mike, if you take a look, once again, I encourage you all to take a look at that master plan. Some of you have no idea what we do. Is you'll see from the contracts you already have on there, Mike, and that's what I think of, is there's a point of contact there. There's one, there's not 10 of them, there's one that usually, as you're saying, is the overall point of contact for the contract itself. There's not 10 of them. I'm thinking that, I don't remember that wording though, but I'm thinking that's what it is. And that does make sense to me. We would understand there'd be other people that would be involved, but pretty much we only have one person that's there.
Right. As far as like the account executive that would oversee it.
Yeah, the account executive. Right. There you go, Melissa. That's the wording.
Thank you.
This is Michael Flood from Khajiit again. Just, I think you answered this earlier when you talked about wired versus wireless options from a provider, but just to be clear, if we have a solution that we can bid by September 1st that may not meet all of the requirements you're looking for, and then we later can come back with an alternate response, is that an option that we could amend later if it's an improvement over what we submit in the first round?
I'll have to ask the folks that. To me, I would like that.
I would ask Stacy to kind of answer that. From my perspective, I would say that sounds fine, but I want to make sure that finance addresses that question if there's any issue or concern with that.
Can you repeat that question one more time? I was looking up another question that's on the board.
That's okay.
Sure. So if as we mentioned, if we're not able to meet all of the desired outcomes in the contract, but we want to respond by September 1st so that we're on contract. So for example, if we can't get to your price point today, that's going to take longer. Is it okay for us to go ahead and submit by 9/1 with what we're able to do now, and then come back and over the evaluation period through December, come back with another bid that could be submitted to get that to closer to your requirements later on?
I need to ask about that. I need to get to my legal because that would be two separate bids for the same service. So let me clarify this with our legal team, please.
And I think part of it is too, can he just lower the cost? It's not necessarily a whole new bid. It's going from like $20 to internally they got something that's 20. It's going to take them a while to work through to get to 15. It's not changing a whole lot of everything else besides trying to bring the cost down. And they may be able to beat better functionality of unlimited by that time. Just those key specs of cost, the bandwidth, the 25 up, 3 down, and then the unlimited, giving them more time to make adjustments to that. We'd be open to that, obviously.
Yeah, let me check with the legal finance.
Understand.
And we'll answer that with the Q&A.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
I understand. Well, that's all I have. I think we've gone through all the questions that I've seen.
The RFP stated that the objections must be stated during the Q&A period. Are we required to identify all potential objections by 3:30 today so we can submit them in the Q&A period?
The Q&A period is for questions only. That's actually what I was trying to pull up to see what you were looking at. The questions and answers are for any kind of questions that the vendors may have for the Commonwealth for us to answer. None of the responses are due today at 3:30.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Stacy, I think we're good. I think we've gone
All
through
right.
it.
Do you want to say anything in closing, David, to kind of sum up everything? You have any closing remarks?
Well, I think I've said it throughout is it's a pretty neat thing that, if I look back over 28 years, the really great experiences and good run and go at life we've been able to give students. And we're really asking for you to work with your corporate leadership to help us during this really a time of need to help us address this next school year. Obviously, we're interested in beyond it, but we have a real pressing need to try to reach students that aren't currently reached. It is a different experience if you have to do NTI by paper versus digital. I can just tell you that. It's a different experience. It's a better experience, I think, digitally than by paper. Even my daughter who teaches, and all of them that are teaching are talking about it is much easier for them to connect with teaching points with their students if it is done digitally right now versus on paper, especially for an extended period of time. Before with NTI, if they had a flu day and they're out for a couple of days, you could do it. This is one that we're really asking our vendors to help us out. And that's why our approach is different than the other states. And I don't know 2 or 3 others that are doing this, but our approach was really try to be inclusive. And anyone that knows about us is we're about, a team as much as we can. We're after partners, not vendors. And that's the reason we've been so successful for 28 years. If we have found partners that have carried that ball for us, and there's a passion, I have it because my mom was a former teacher. I have 4 teachers in my family, a passion for students. And this hits home for me, trying to reach these students that don't have it. It's hard, during this time. So I'd ask that you all do that. Thanks.
Thank you, David. I just want to summarize some of the housekeeping as far as the procurement stuff. This is always the fun stuff, isn't it? I want to remind everyone today, it is a firm time of 3:30 that you submit all questions to me via email on the Excel spreadsheet that was attached on your VSS. It's attachment D. That must be submitted on your spreadsheet. Also, their answers will be posted tomorrow. It probably will be later in the afternoon tomorrow night when the cycle runs before it'll hit the web. But be sure to look for it tomorrow night. You will have it available for this weekend. I also want to remind everybody, I am the sole contact for this RFP. This is an open procurement. You are not permitted to contact anyone other than myself regarding this procurement. If this occurs, your proposal may be rejected and not considered for award. Please keep that in mind because I know that this is a statewide with all the districts and stuff. And I would not want for anything to happen, you not to be able to, your proposals be accepted. Please be sure to follow the RFP instructions when submitting your proposals, and please read it carefully. And be sure to adhere of any addendums that are posted for this RFP for further instructions. Again, we want to thank you for participating in this conference call, and we look forward to working with you all. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thanks, Stacy.
Thank you all.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Stacy.
Have a great day.
Thanks, you too. Bye now.